This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
This is going to be a very interesting chapter to talk about.
Yeah, everyone get your thinking caps on. We're going into non-Euclidean space.
These are what I would consider non-Euclidean theories.
Very.
They don't really fit in.
Here.
It's ripply.
Like, technically the plot does get forwarded in this chapter, but most of what happens is wibbly-wobbly, spacey-wacy, timey-wimey.
Timey-wimey stuff, yeah. And not really in the first half. There's a lot of recap to begin with, and then some events happen, and then we have some theory to talk about. But this is one of those chapters that I went into my research thinking one thing, and I came out of my research thinking another thing. And that I love when that happens, right? Because I had an assumption about what was going on in this chapter. And now I certainly don't know if my assumption was wrong, but I certainly don't believe it's correct. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's no one answer for me coming out of this chapter.
Yeah, Seth was messaging me as he was doing his research, and I'm just like, I did not expect that to be what we were debating today.
I was like, wait, I'm finding answers that don't agree with what I believe. Crap.
Yeah, and it's ironic you were saying that, because at the same time I was in the Wheel Takes server, staunchly defending my ability to be wrong in public. I just confused someone about geology and used an example and then had to immediately backtrack on the example because it actually was a really bad example of what I was talking about. And it was a whole thing, and we were just in there being like, yeah, and you just admit you were wrong. It's not that big of a deal. Whatever. I was wrong. So I'm having that conversation, and then Seth is messaging me like, we were wrong. We're so wrong. So I get to put all of that chatter into practice today, I guess. I can say it on one server, but can I say it on mic?
The problem with doing a podcast like this is there are hours of evidence in public of being wrong. And that's what we didn't edit out.
Man.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so the first of the old episodes are starting to come out today, where I'm doing the Patreon feed of old episodes.
Yep.
And I'm also working through putting ad music into those old episodes. And my God, you and Patrick knew nothing. It's like, did you even read these books? My God. The shit you were asking each other was just like, good Lord.
I mean, and the thing is, I'd read these how many thousands of times, right? It really was a process of discovery because, we were having these circular discussions where we were like, what the fuck is going on in these books? I do not know. And so in a lot of ways, the podcast was started from ignorance. It was never us saying, hey, this is what we think, and we are going to dictate that to the people around us. We've read these more than anybody else. We're smarter than anybody else. It really was God, these books are long, and I can't fucking remember everything. Let's talk about it in a way that starts from the beginning and moves forward and figure out all the things that we have wrong, right? It was never a process of dictating the truth.
It's the progression is obvious.
Yeah.
If you go back to the beginning, and it's like, you guys are asking questions that I remember us all collectively answering because it wasn't a simple answer. It did take a group effort to put together all that shit and come up with those answers. And it's kind of cool. It'll be like, oh yeah, this podcast used to be just as confused as anyone else. And now we have this massed body of knowledge that is longer in duration, at least, than the audiobooks themselves. So we know a few things, but today we're going to unknow a few things.
Yeah.
We're gonna lose information today with the convolutions of picking this apart.
Let me just say I will no longer refer to the events in this chapter as a Bale scream.
Which upsets me emotionally, but as we'll get into, there are intellectually satisfying reasons for why he's saying that. He's still wrong. Emotionally, just to be clear.
Do you want to talk about something strange?
Sure. The ellipses in the title just really bothers me for some reason. I do not like that there's an ellipses in the title.
I like that there are 3 ellipses in the title. Just like there are 3 ripples in the pattern. Right? Something ... Those 3 dots, 3 ripples. Maybe that's the explanation. The Bale scream or the ripples are just misplaced ellipses. And it's just a comment on...
These are just creator typos in the
Yep.
writing of the world.
And it manifested into the world itself.
There's no other way to do an ellipses. Our symbol is the snake and wheel, because generalized plot with no particular character, I guess.
Well, I was going to say anything to deal with the bigger pattern
Oh,
often gets
sure.
the snake and wheel, and the pattern is rippling. So
Sure, this is one of the pattern is literally a character
right
in this
right.
chapter. All right, yeah, that makes sense.
And often, I know it often is the default one, but when I see it, I think something is going on with the pattern, or Taviran, or bigger events, something like that.
And this very much qualifies. All right. The drumbeat of rain on the tent roof that had lasted through most of the night faded to something softer as Fail approached Savannah's chair, a heavily carved and gilded throne placed in the center of the bright, layered carpets that made up the tent's floor, with her eyes carefully lowered to avoid offense. Spring had arrived in a rush, but the braziers were unlit, and the morning air held a touch of chill. Curtsying deeply, she presented the ropework silver tray. The Aiel woman took the golden goblet of wine and drank without so much as a glance in her direction, but she gave another deep curtsy before backing away and setting the tray down on the brass-bound blue chest that already held a tall-necked silver wine pitcher and 3 more goblets, then returned to her place with the other 11 Gaishine present, standing between the mirrored stand lamps along the red silk tent wall. It was a spacious tent, and tall. No low Aiel tent for Savannah. Often it was hard to see her as Aiel at all. This morning, she lounged in a red brocaded silk robe, tied so it gaped nearly to her waist and exposed half her considerable bosom, though she wore enough jeweled necklaces, emeralds and fire drops and opals, ropes of fat pearls, that she came near to being decent. The Aiel did not wear rings, yet Savannah had at least one begemmed ring on every finger. The thick band of gold and fire drops worn over the folded blue silk scarf that held back her waist-long yellow hair had taken on the aspect of a coronet, if not a crown. There was nothing Aiel in that. I just wanted to read that whole description of her because she's wannabe Grandal. That's what she's doing. She's unconsciously patterning herself as a Grandal figure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just becoming more and more Wetlander, right? Like, we've seen her basically become more and more corrupt, more and more obsessed with wealth and material things. And yes, that is Grendel, certainly, but like she's not nearly... It's like a C-tier Grendel at best.
Oh, yeah, no, she is Dollar General knockoff Grendel for sure. But like her and Thorava both to me very much feel like watered down versions of Forsaken. Savannah being Semirog. Like there's the pleasure in cruelty.
Sure.
Again, not consciously patterning herself off of that, but it's just like...
This is the archetype from which they came.
Yeah, I wonder if RJ is kind of saying, like, this is who they were before, right? Like, just another person who was a little cruel, you know? And then they become, you know...
They get
Semirog.
A little power, yeah.
You can never tell. Right? You can never tell if they're just going to stay a C-tier wannabe queen or if they're going to become like Grandal. Literally.
Because, you know, I mean, her plan, which is to get, you know, channelers to swear oaths to her so she has complete control over them and basically take their power. I mean, you can get powerful in that way.
Yeah. And she also really has a lot of like cult leader going on too, with her control of everyone to the point of like keeping their schedules chaotic and keeping them all like tired and stuff. She's got some like real cult management going on. And it also kind of reminds me of like more politicians than just Trump, but Trump is the obvious example of just like declaring something and having no one be able to effectively say no.
Yeah.
And thus it becomes reality. Like we say that a lot about Elida, but I think we see that a lot with Savannah too. She just keeps not being told no.
Oh, sure.
She's like, well, I'm the clan chief. The election was stolen, right? She just makes shit up and just has enough people who can't say no around her that it drives the whole ass community into a cliff. Because I'm thinking about
Well, that's the same thing with Elaine's opposition, right?
Elenia.
Who's just like out there being like, we're going to take the throne. Everyone's like, oh, okay. Like, don't really see a way you can do that, but we're trying, right? No one's saying no to
Right.
her, you know?
Right. And then you've got, people like the Meriden within the Shido being like, we signed up for one thing, but shit is going off the rails and we have to choose a moment to jump off. But up until that moment we actually jump, we are riding along this fucking nonsense without actually wanting to be part of it because we supported it for completely different reasons to get it going. And that's what the wise ones are also going through, like under Savannah. This, on the one hand, this is a lot of recap. On the other hand, this is a very granular look at the entirety of Savannah's arc and really being like, this is what we hath wrought. This is the culmination of that woman that we first met way back in Shadow Rising. Like, here we are. Here she is. It's bad. Bad things have happened.
I'm nodding.
And she is very much, I both like and dislike how much he drives home that she's not Aiel anymore, because it like puts the Aiel on a pedestal of like, oh, they're so perfect and amazing. And like, may we remind you, they're the only people who sell people into chattel slavery. So like, that's a thing. In the entire cast, the only people who engage in slavery are the Aiel, albeit only as slave traders. So that's weird, but also it is nice to be like, when you commit to the bit too hard and you lose yourself, because she's not Aiel anymore. She's completely uprooted from where she came from. She can't rely on her community and her ancestry anymore. She's freewheeling.
Yeah, it's like when we went through the crystal columns and we saw the Aiel history, and there's these repeated breaking offs of groups, right? You lost the Tinkers, in a lot of ways you lost, the Aiel really were I guess I shouldn't say this, but you had the 13th clan, you had all the different clans of Aiel breaking off.
There was lots of clans that got lost.
Right, and lots of clans got lost.
The ones who didn't agree,
right.
They all died. There was way more than the 12.
Right.
12, yeah.
Yeah, 13.
Yeah. Well, the Gen were the ones handing out the judgment, so they don't count in this particular math.
The 13th clan. And so, yeah, there was a lot more Aiel out there. And this, to me, the Shido and Galena becoming Wetlanders is another sort of branching that we're seeing in that history, going forward from that point instead of going backwards from that point, right?
Right. Yeah, they've crossed a point of no return. And there's some kind of new Aiel who, maybe just...
They're Shido. They're not Aiel.
Right. And what she's doing is fully assimilating into her idea of wetland culture, which obviously wetlanders are not a monolith. There's like several different cultures that the wetlands have. But she is assimilating to her ideal of it. And if the rest of them follow her, which it seems like that's a lot of what's happening, drunkenness and assault and laziness and all of these things that are not Aiel principles. Like, I feel a little bit of like there's some noble savage trope coming through a little bit, slightly.
Sure. It reminds me of how the Andorrans built the Dragon Throne for Rand in the Kyrianan style, but overdid it because they mistook what the Kyrianan style actually was. They just stereotyped it, right? And Savannah's doing the same thing with the Wetlander culture, is she's adapting what she perceives the Wetlander culture to be, and therefore overdoing it in this way that's absolutely absurd in anybody's eyes, because nobody actually lives that way.
Right, she's amalgamating and simplifying, and like the Andorrans couldn't understand the aesthetic underpinnings of why the Kyrianan have the style they do.
So they just make something that's incredibly gaudy.
Yeah, and Savannah is even worse in that she is not even trying. She's just magpieing whatever suits her personality.
Oh, yeah.
Which, at least the Andorrans were trying to, like, soothe Rand's ego or whatever. Like, it's different, but she's just the worst and is just magpieing all the worst things from what is presented as a significantly more sinful culture. RJ definitely has the Westlands being all full of the 7 deadly sins and the Aiel being, the desert nomad people that are awesome.
Who apparently conceive immaculately because... Never mind.
What?
You were just saying they don't have any sin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I guess I have a little sin.
Little sin.
Okay.
Speaking of a little bit of sin, Galena shows up, and her first description, she was panting so hard her breasts heaved. Just point that one out.
So yeah, what the scene is that she's being argued over again between Savannah and Tharava, and Faile is watching. And yeah, she is naked and distressed, so we have to have heaving breasts. Just super necessary to have that.
She walked boobily down the stairs.
Yeah, she is breasting boobily all over this Aiel camp. And she is stripped of all clothes and all body hair.
Yep.
All body hair. Just imagine that in all the detail you need, RJ. Thank you so much for making me do that. And except for her jewelry. She is dressed in mud and bruises and jewelry.
Bruised from what? Her entire back from heels to head?
Yeah.
Basically.
And basically what it is that Galena is having her entire body kept mottled in bruises for as long as there's any trace of bruise on her face from what Barrelane did to her at her request. Because somehow Tharava knows that Galena's fucking with her and that those bruises were actually Galena's fault.
Well, I think you get blamed for a bruise on your face whether it's your fault or not. Right? That's the punishment, right? Oh, you got a bruise on your face? I don't care if you had anything to do with it. I don't care. It's like you are punished for having a bruise. Whether or, your actions led to my property being bruised, therefore you were punished.
Yeah. So she's very, very much being abused. We get descriptions of her screams being familiar to everyone because just Tharava's torturing her constantly. And that's great. And then Savannah is complaining about how there's nowhere good left to injure on her for punishment because Tharava's done it so thoroughly. And Tharava's like, you can still hit her on her heaving breasts if you want. And it's just like, RJ, stop. Stop it. I don't like this.
So they're talking and complaining about Tharava, but here's something interesting, and I think it's interesting because of timing.
Okay.
Water, Tharava said firmly. As for it being early, the sun is almost over the horizon. Tharava is drinking water from the wells, right?
The cistern.
The cistern. Now, based on the timing of the Bale Scream, and I think this is accurate, we can go look at Chapter 26. So Chapter 26 is Perrin's POV of what I think is the same day. And the reason is he also experiences, I'm still calling it a Bale Scream, he also experiences the Bale Scream, the three ripples. And the chapter starts in the middle of the night, but it seems to end in the early morning, right? And there's a quote here where they talk about the two clans being a few days away. In Perrin's chapter, they're 3 days away.
Okay.
And both nights it rains and then clears up, right? So we're syncing, even though it's chapter 26, which is quite a bit time delay, that chapter is essentially syncing up with this one, which means that right before dawn, Perrin started dumping the fork root in the water supply.
Okay.
Now, this is basically at the same moment, right? So this is a little too early for Tharava to be affected because the water has to travel down the cistern and steep for a while, right?
Right. He's trying to get the breakfast rush with the tea,
right.
And she's having pre-breakfast
water, which is, I think, one of the reasons why she escapes, right?
I was trying to remember how she was described because she does escape, and I was trying to remember how she was described because they do say a bunch of them are asleep, but she is awake. She is one of the few wise ones who is up and functional. God damn! I didn't realize it was all the same day. I thought Faile had the rod hidden for longer than that. Wow.
No, based on the Bale Scream timing, right?
Yeah, because it has to happen to them at the same time, given their physical proximity. It's definitely a time sync for them. Wow. So the tea is actively getting into the water supply, but she's drinking water that does not have any in it or doesn't have enough in it to matter. That
hasn't basically accumulated enough yet. And so I'm guessing she's filled up her water pouch already, so that's what she drinks out of all day, and so that's why she's okay.
Right, because she gets up before the sun and gets all of her shit together before the sun even rises, and Perrin is using pre-dawn as the light to dump the tea in. So she's wow. I'm so glad you looked ahead to chapter 26 and got us the info, because that's That's a long way from now in terms of book time.
It is. It is. Yeah. No. But it is. It's happening at the same time, right? We've got this Bale scream, and honestly, if I think there's a reason for the Bale scream, it's to create a time sink between the two characters, because he realized that they were so separated in book time, right? Chapter 5 to chapter 26. He's like, I need something to sync those up. I'll throw some. And I'm going with Bubble of Evil, localized Bubble of Evil, in order to create a time sink between those two chapters. And that's all the explanation he needs for it. So that's theory one about why I think it might not be a Bale scream, but an actual Bubble of Evil. But we'll get to more as I come to it.
Yeah, the time sinking is definite. We also get a time reminder of how long it's been for her, less than 2 months.
Yep.
And later she says how many days. It's been like a month since Roland saved her from freezing to death. There's
an awful lot of time markers in this chapter, right? He's very clearly saying this many days from that event, this many days from this event, these things are happening at the same time. He's putting a lot of things in this chapter to help us place it in time, which makes me think it's just out of place in time in the story.
Right. Yeah, and here's another description of why I feel like Savannah is meant to be like, here's a non-demigod version of Grandal. Savannah gathered the rich, the powerful, and the beautiful for her Gaishan. Like, that's...
Oh, yeah, there is a certain amount... Yeah.
I'm like, that's Grandal. She's she's a unpowered Grandal who is on her way, like, in another world where the Dark One is looking for recruits. She could take the Grandal position in a different pantheon.
Honestly, would have loved to see Savannah at the head of a group of Dark Friend Aiel fighting for the Dark One.
You know what would have been really fun is if we saw her conversion to the Dark happen.
No, yeah, because we never really see anybody get recruited, right?
Yeah, like if she wasn't a Dark Friend, she was just a shitty person, and then through the events of the book, she chooses to reach out and become a Dark Friend. We never see that. That would be so freaking cool. And then, leading like a wave of, maybe she leads some of the Aiel from the Blight, or just Dark Friend Aiel from this side of the world. Like, either way, or
just the Shaido to fight for the Dark One.
Yeah, totally. The way that Diamondre gets an apparently entire culture to fight on the side of the Dark One with the Shards. Mm-hmm. Like, that would have been, that would have been cool. That would have been cool.
Especially since, like, we're opposing Rand al'Thor. We've always opposed Rand al'Thor, right? That's justification enough.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. Fuck this guy. Even if the world burns, it'll burn with us right. We'll be correct as we go down. It'll be fine. No, that would have been so awesome. Instead of her getting unceremoniously whisked off into Shan-Chan captivity with no further plot. Like, I like that. Someone write that fic.
Again, my rewriting of Jordan's of what I thought Jordan would have given us had he been alive, which is not actually accurate.
You know what? Flicker.
If Rafe can do it, so can I.
Exactly.
So there's this debate going on between them about moving versus staying in place. It doesn't matter. Perrin's about to crush them out of existence, right? Like,
I think what's interesting is the tussle over power and the right to authority between them over Couladin. And, like, who speaks as the clan chief, and do you actually mean to get captured by Rand so that you can seduce him? And, like, the power balance, I feel like, is finally shifting Tharava's way.
Yes.
Savannah has lost her edge enough. She's rested on her laurels just a little bit too much and has lost her momentum.
Indulged a little too much.
She's drinking wine before the sun comes up. I'm sorry, that is not good for your intelligence score.
Yeah, and again, comment again and again. Tharava took another swallow of water. Tharava sneered over her goblet. Jordan's just like, water. She's drinking water. Yeah.
I can't believe I never even began to try clocking that in all my rereads. Because, like, this is still a book that I've reread a bazillion times. My reread count doesn't drop off until next book.
Right. See, where I would say my reread definitely drops off this one.
Yeah, this is the first one I waited on, so it's technically gotten less rereads, but I feel like I know it better than the following three, so I'm... Anyway. We get some really fun recap where Faile doesn't know what she's hearing about, but we do.
Sure.
Where they're talking about, like, At times, the two women seemed like antagonists. Other times, they seemed reluctant conspirators bound together by something that gave neither any comfort. Like the murder of Desane, like all of that. Like Fail's seeing it laid out in really naked terms because they're not speaking with anyone important around. But she has no idea
Just
what she's hearing. So I enjoy being in the head of someone who doesn't know what they're hearing, but it's very helpful to me as the reader.
Yeah, but we know. Yeah.
Or yeah, it makes sense to me. It's not necessarily helpful, but it makes sense.
Tharava's basically saying if Aes Sedai can control Rand, so can I.
It's an incredible leap of logic.
Right.
Like, did you not see how well that went for the Aes Sedai?
Mm-hmm. Tharava's like, I'm looking for, who gave Couladin permission to go. I'm like, Couladin who? I don't remember that dude. Like, seriously, at this point, what relevance does he even have, right?
I mean, you got to relitigate shit that's already super past the point of making any sense because that's how our bureaucracy works,
But it really shows that Tharava believes that Couladin was the Karakarn. She was fooled by Asmodean's plot.
Right, yeah, she was a true believer.
Yes.
And now she's sunk cost fallacy, making it work through the cognitive dissonance.
And whereas Savannah's just always in it for her own benefit.
Yeah, Savannah was always in it cynically. She didn't really think that the wise ones had much of anything to say and thought that history... She probably doesn't really care much for history, just as a subject. She doesn't really see the point. But yeah, Tharava actually truly believed and is dealing with her disappointment the only way she knows how, by insisting she was right all along and just ignoring everything she knows that contradicts that and just moving forward.
Do you want to talk about what Tharava has done to Magdan, a.k.a. Queen Morghese?
I mean, I know.
All Magdan would say of it was she wanted to kill the other woman. Sometimes she whimpered in her sleep, though.
I mean, I think it's a great job of RJ just allowing you to do the math yourself on your own time. I've speculated many times, and I hate all of it.
At this point, I think Jordan just enjoys making Queen Morghese be assaulted. He's done it so many times. It's like, come on. What is going on at this point?
Yeah. Can this woman catch a break? The answer is no, never. Because we know that the Aiel have very inventive ways of inflicting pain and punishment, but we also know that Robert Jordan really doesn't like Morghese to be happy. And we know that Tharava is being taught to bottom quite thoroughly. So, one would assume something in that vein for the proud, beautiful Morghese, because that's how RJ frames power dynamics.
But the power play that Tharava is doing at Savannah is she sent somebody else to go be clan chief, basically. So if he goes and makes it through Rhuidean, he gets to come back and dethrone her. I don't actually think that's much of a threat, because I don't think any Shaido can make it through Rhuidean.
Sure, but they have to find out, and at this point, they have no reason to believe it won't work.
Right.
So the wise ones will have to come back and report on how this test goes and be like, ooh.
Yeah, everyone we send in dies because they can't accept it, because that's why they're with the it's circular, right? The reason they're with the Shaido is because they can't accept the visions that Rand told them about in the gates or in the columns. And so if they go through the columns, they will be unable to accept it, and you will get what was Couladin's brother's name? Muradin. Muradin. Yeah, you get a Muradin situation. And that's never pleasant. No one likes to claw out their own eyes.
No, that seems like a pretty distressing situation to be in. We never hear about if these wise ones make it back to the Shaido, because they leave, and not even a week later, half a week later, the camp gets, overrun with Perrin people, and a fragment of them decide to take off to the waste.
And the last battle happens before they could travel a fraction of the distance across the continent.
So that guy doesn't even get a chance to die in the columns.
No.
Like, Avienda goes there and turns it into a future look-forward machine before he even gets within sniffing distance of Rhuidean.
And, it's a city now full of Aiel. Like, he's just not going to be able to walk right in.
Well, no, they can. They describe it as being... When Avienda goes there, it gets described as still being kind of set aside from the life of the city, because they know that the wandering Aiel are still gonna come back. But yeah, they're just out in the middle of nowhere, just hiking, and then the last battle happens and they're nowhere doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. And based on the way the world sort of corrupts and falls apart and changes, I feel like you cannot necessarily survive on your own in the world, right? People are starving to death everywhere if they're not joining the armies because of the corruption of the food.
If the trees aren't just turning into snakes that eat you and then turn back into trees for some random reason.
Right. So
yeah, they probably just vanish. Oof.
That's my assumption. Yeah.
So yeah, they're never, and I assume that if the Aiel, the Shido, were to make it back to the Waste with Thorava, I assume that they die out very quickly if they make it, if any of them make it, which they may not.
Right, like we see with all the Aiel who go their own way and don't follow the columns, right?
Exactly.
They all die out.
Yeah.
The Waste is murderous, brutal.
Yeah, they are not the remnant of the remnant that Rand saves.
We have prophecy basically guaranteeing they won't survive.
Yeah, basically. So we leave the tent and we get some. Bane and Chiad are contemptuous of Savannah for using the Maidens of the Spear as her honor guard, and they're contemptuous of the Maidens for allowing it. Again, another sign that it's not just Savannah who's not Aiel anymore. You know, like this is a cultural. It's the Shido. The Shido and the Aiel are two separate people now.
It's corrupted the whole clan, right?
And we get a head count for how many people are here, right? 14 septs, 100,000 Shido, and as many Gaishine, right? Lots and lots of people. This is a massive city situation.
Rumor said 2 more septs, Moriai and the White Cliff would arrive within days. In Perrin's POV, he says scouts say they will arrive within 3 days. So that seems to sync up nicely.
I like how blacksmiths are still working in this camp. It says, except for blacksmiths, the Shido seldom did any work themselves. Blacksmiths are not just sacred, they're also holding more closely to Aiel traditions. Like, what is it with blacksmiths? There's the Aiel blacksmith thing.
In Perrin, right? The whole hammer versus the axe, the spear versus the hammer, right? I feel like there's a lot of parallels between... Blacksmiths are interesting because in a lot of ways they are more peaceful because they don't need to fight because their skills are treasured. So, and they create. So in a lot of ways, they're truer to the original way of the Leaf and more sacred to the Aiel people in that way.
Right. But like that translates to them still wanting to do their work even as everyone else gets ridiculous.
Yeah. Engineers always want to keep working when everybody else stops.
That's super fair.
Yeah.
That's super fair. Yeah. Also, it's like a super skilled task that's probably very culturally specific. Like, not just any wetlander can be made to do Aiel smithing. Right? Like, that's a skill that takes years to learn, I would assume, because, like the whole Tinkers Mending Pots thing, like, they know what they're doing, and Aiel come from the same tradition. So, that probably has a lot to do with it, too.
Also, if you're going to fight, you need spears, right? Like,
truly.
And that can't be replaced with quote-unquote unskilled labor. Terrible term, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, raw recruits that are voluntold that they're in the army now are not as good as trained fighters. But for the most part, we've got Aiel taking baths and getting drunk and committing assault, and not being blacksmiths in general.
Right. This is a undisciplined army at this point. It is more of a mob than an army.
Yeah, the arminess of it is rapidly dissolving away to reveal that it's just a mob. Yeah, it's like the Roman army in reverse. Basically, they're just running backwards through the Roman army progression. And
so, Fael shows up, and basically they're like, "Oh, I assumed you got pulled into a tent by some drunken dude who's gonna rape you. That's why I went looking for you, because you're late."
Yeah, she meets a wise one who's like, "I came to quote unquote to kind of sort of rescue you if you were in trouble with one of these people that just I don't approve of it, but apparently it just happens now.
No, I'm not gonna do anything about it, or
Yeah, we'd like to fix these problems, but we're going to need just a little more time before we can actually get around to these real pressing issues that we can absolutely see are happening and are unusual and recent and because of current leadership, but we're going to need a little more time.
And that's where she talks about how the brotherless have been protecting her and the other guy Shine, and
Yeah, basically everyone in her circle has an attached shadow that Roland definitely didn't ask them to do that, but also, like, he totally asked them to do that, like, without
Right.
asking, right? Like, and, you know, again, he says that, like, the Meriden have come to the realization that this was a bad call all around, which, like, you know, power to the Meriden for realizing that. It's too late, but
Too late. Yeah,
this
a little
is-
too late.
this is part of how they're beginning the process of fighting back and decoupling while still being in the camp. Is like, all right, well, we're going to pick a couple guys shine and we're going to protect them and we're going to, like, take them away when the time comes, which is like, you know, the time was literally any day would have been the time. Again, oh, you need a little more time. No, you don't. You should leave.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it's nice that Robert Jordan was like, yeah, no, sexual assault is really rampant, but our main cast is mostly protected. It's like, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess.
Especially because he's like, oh, and it's also a super transactional, like, unequal power dynamic sexual situation for all of them.
But he carved out an exception for Queen Morghese.
Yeah, and also an exception for Fael. They get two different exceptions. Right, because she's not actually sleeping with her protector, and Morghese can't be protected.
Yeah.
But Roland is still romantically interested in her in a very persistent way. And, like, there's a lot to be said about the nature of consent. But it's sort of one of those things that is generally agreed upon, that if you are in a slaver-enslaved context, you cannot have consent. Which means that all of these encounters, quote unquote, consensual or not, are not actually consensual, and they're all assaults because all the women are enslaved. That
Right.
is the long and the short of it. And Roland's giving Fael, quote unquote, choice does not make it any better.
And also, it doesn't make the emotions the women feel afterwards any less valid just because it was a non-consensual situation. Right.
Exactly.
But, like,
it's complicated.
But, like, you understand why those women murdered the men they were sleeping with, because it was a not, like, there's no way it could be a consensual relationship.
Yeah, and woman, right? One of them is sleeping with a woman and does the exact
That's
same
right.
thing because
Right.
it's still a slaver-enslaved relationship, and thus there is no potential for actual consent. But yes, certainly they have the complicated version of this where they actually do develop feelings for this person and believe that they are consenting to it for survival's sake. And, like, I mean, and they are consenting for survival's sake. It's different than being, like, completely forced. But it's a weird thing to be in this world where he has sexual assault as a very rare thing on the edges, and then just suddenly it's endemic to one of the populations. Like, it's a tonal shift that really, like, reflects the darkness of the Darth Rand of it all at this point in the timeline, you know? Like, on the one hand, I hate it. On the other hand, it feels very appropriate that even as the reader, I'm feeling the darkness, like, getting more intense, and everything's getting more grimdark, and, like, like, that is what is happening. I just do wish it could have been a slightly different way. But I can see why RJ did it this way, because that's who he is.
So as Fael's relaying the events to this wise one, in the process of relaying that information, we get the ripples.
Yeah, do you want me to read it?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So she's describing what has been going on in the tent. She had just reached the Rava's arrival with Galena when everything in front of her eyes rippled. She rippled. It was not imagination. Miera's blue eyes widened as far as they could go. She had felt it too. Again, everything rippled, including herself, harder than before. In shock, Fael stood up straight and let go of her robe. A third time, the world rippled, harder still, and as it passed through her, she felt as if she might blow away in a breeze, or simply dissipate in a mist. Breathing hard, she waited for the fourth ripple, the one she knew would destroy her and everything else. When it did not come, she expelled every bit of air in her lungs from relief. It gives me shivers.
All right, so here's where we have to, like, I have to break down the theories, right? Like, I have to talk about what all they possibly could be, because there are a lot of different theories here.
All right, take it away.
In the research, and I didn't find one. So, all right, the first thing is the Bale Scream, right? That when, and this is sort of what I thought going into the chapter, when Rand balefires Natrum's Barrow, there is essentially a ripple that occurs at that point, right? There is a Bale Scream that occurs at that point. And that there is a lot of thought that this is, because balefire affects things that go back in time, this is essentially an echo of that Bale Scream going back in time. But there's a couple of problems with that, right, for me. First of all, it's 3 Bale Screams, not 1. Which you could argue that's, displacement in time. It's also displacement in location. Natrum's Barrow and Malden are nowhere close to each other. And the Bale Scream doesn't appear to be continent-wide, right? We only ever see Perrin and Fail react to it. It is localized to this area. It is not a continent-wide or even worldwide phenomenon. So all of a sudden, Bale Scream is looking less and less likely to me. The other thing that we have is from Brandon Sanderson, right? So basically he was quoted as saying the Bale Scream was the result of Demandred bale-firing cities, right? Because we get this thing at the end of Lord of Chaos, right? Demandred is told, use balefire, unravel the pattern for me, let the Lord of Chaos rule. But we don't really have any evidence of that. So the question is he out there in Shara bale-firing cities causing these Bale Screams, right? And we're getting the result of maybe Demandred's using the chalice that he's received and bale-firing cities, and that's what we're getting. So that's certainly a possibility. But when Brandon was questioned about that, he clarified, that is not what I said. Someone asked him what caused the balefire screams, and he said, I don't know. By the way, Demandred was bale-firing whole cities.
What caused the ripples that we've been calling Bale Screams? But
yes,
to be clear,
yes,
ripples that are happened in this chapter.
Right. So it appears, going back and looking at that, he really did not mean to imply these Bale Screams were caused by Demandred. That appears to be a misquote. Right, so that's theory number 2, right? Demandred was causing these Bale Screams by bale-firing cities. And so and then I sort of was like, what if it's not balefire, and also if it's localized, what happened in that area? And all I can come up with is that it is a bubble of evil that nearly tears their localized reality apart, right? It's a ripple, because the Bale Scream also talks about flattening into 2D, and the ripple actually kind of seems like a description of something different happening. And so I think this is a point where a bubble of evil floated to the surface, found Perrin because he's ta'veren, like bubbles of evil like to do, popped, created a localized effect of these 3 ripples, and if it had been much worse, if the pattern had been much more stressed, we would have had a 4th ripple that would have torn everything apart in that localized area. Kind of like, remember how there's that area where everything turns to dust and Nynaeve pushes on it and the whole thing just disintegrates, right? I imagine something like that would have happened to this area. The pattern would have ripped.
So you wonder if maybe they felt something like that before they all turned to dust or whatever.
Right.
You can't ask them, right? Because they're dust now. But maybe reality got fuzzy feeling in the moments before. Huh.
She felt as she might blow away in a breeze or simply dissipate in a mist, right?
Right. Yeah, until you started messaging me about this, I had never questioned it being a Bale Scream. I thought it was a weird, non-Euclidean reaction of the pattern to the massive displacement of Natrun's Barrow. I'd never heard the Brandon Sanderson thing. I just assumed it had to be a Natrun's Barrow thing. But it was so out of time that I was like, well, maybe it just doesn't have to be in the same point in time as the balefire, because it is a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, Deus Ex Machina kind of thing. But there's always been a couple of hangups for me with that, which was that, again, the non-proximity. But I'm like, okay, well, ta'veren. But Mat doesn't experience the same thing.
No.
And that always felt like a huge hole to me, that I could see Rand not experiencing it because he's the epicenter of the thing, so it's different. But if it's gonna affect one ta'veren buddy, it has to affect both, otherwise it's not ta'veren buddy shit. So I just, it always felt weak to me, but I never thought about it too hard because I was like, Balefire doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, like, this thing that doesn't make sense that.
It's also too far back in time from Natrim's Barrow. Natrim's Barrow, Balefire, again, other Brandon Sanderson quote, right? Take from it what you will. And this, we've seen this in the books, right? That Balefire can only affect things so far back. Even Rand at his most powerful only affected Ravine for a couple of hours at most, maybe an hour, right? So there's no way you're, maybe with Chodenkal at full power, maybe you're getting like a week, right?
Yeah.
The Spale Scream is occurring significantly before that.
Right, which is why I always thought it was just like some like uber weird, like it skipped a bunch of time for some reason. And just but like it just, that's been very unsatisfying. Bubble of Evil, on the other hand, which I had never considered because I am a ding-dong who only looks at what's on the page and doesn't actually think about connecting dots. Bubble of Evil actually ties up all the loose ends.
It does.
It doesn't have any odd bits poking out. It's just a bubble of evil. And like we've had bubbles of evil that kind of make an effort to come in threes or something. Like that has happened too. So like the threeness of it all also feels correct to me. So yeah, I had never thought of Bubble of Evil, but I can't see a good reason to go against it. So like we have to call the Bale Scream ripples not Bale Screams anymore. And it makes me sad, but I'm willing to be wrong in public and corrected. My beloved headcanon.
I know, right? Like, it's just totally ruined.
I liked my non-Euclidean makes no sense headcanon. Damn it. Get in here with your facts and your logic. White Aja bullshit.
What else? I'm open to alternate theories, right? But like, and I do think, hey, if you want a headcanon, Demandred's over there in Shara and he Balefire at 3 cities and you get 3 Balefire screams, like, I think that's a great thing. Maybe it's like, maybe where Perrin and Fail are exactly opposite the planet, right?
Yeah, maybe.
And that's how you get like, localized Bale screams. Or
this comment in chat from Pants. What if bubbles of evil are just and ripples are caused by too much bale firing?
I mean, they are certainly could be related, right? This idea that like
reality is being destabilized by like kicking the bricks out from the foundation.
Right, and that's happening both because the Dark One's infiltrating it and the seals are weakening, right? And he's surging with bubbles of evil, right? We talked about how like as the seals break, the bubbles of evil become more frequent. And okay, that was the other sort of theory that I had, that perhaps, and this is disproven, right? But maybe before the last book was written, right? Because he planned on Memory of Light being one book.
Sure.
So this was the book before the last book. What if originally he had planned on those 3 ripples being the last 3 seals breaking?
Oh, that would make a lot of sense. Given the timing of the theft, we're not sure when the theft happened at this point, and
just in the last chapter, we had the Forsaken talking about, we must find the seals, as though he doesn't already fucking have them.
Right.
Right, so that maybe he has them in the previous chapter, right? We saw Ishamael talking about, we've got to find the seals, and we know Demandred sent Taim has already given Rand his tracking seal, right?
Yeah, but why would only Perrin experience it, not the whole
That's
world?
My big issue. That's my big issue.
Or...
Why is it localized?
Yeah.
Why is it localized?
Because if it was the three boys, I'd be like, okay, the Taviran nature of it all, they're epicenters for little ripples in the firmament. But only Perrin? Perrin isn't particularly connected to the seals. But I wish that was true. Damn, why are all the good headcanons not good? Like, logically.
And then obviously Sanderson, we see them broken, right? So this is clearly not, whatever was in the notes, these were not the seals breaking, right?
But that could have been cool if like the 3 boys had each created like a 5-mile wide like pocket of instability, like as each seal was broken, like, and then Rand knew that it was time for the last battle. Like this could have been, but it's totally not.
Right.
But he needed a way to sync these guys up, so he was like Bubble of Evil. Because like, he used a cock crowing, right? In the Stone of Tyr. Like, He's like, I like bubbles of evil for time sinks. This is a thing I will do.
Exactly.
And that was literally a cock crowed 3 times. So in this case, reality is just crowing 3 times.
But yeah, Bubble of Evil as a time sink across multiple characters is something he has done multiple times, and it fits this situation really well.
Wow. That's, as Super Skylick said, a letdown.
A little bit, right? I'm like, oh, I don't like that theory as much. I might go back to it just being a Bale scream from Natrim's Barrow that like nearly destroyed the world in the past going forward. Like,
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to dislodge that headcanon that I've had for so long for something so lackluster, even if it is true.
Right.
It's just not lustrous.
Yeah, but you can see where I started. I really started the research in one spot and really came to a different spot where I'm just like, the evidence points me to Bubble of Evil.
Yeah, well, we are an evidence-based podcast based on a fantasy series.
Yeah, there are no emotions involved in our opinions whatsoever. None. We are pure white Aja, 100%. No emotions.
And these are very real things.
Yeah.
We are arguing about real shit that has a real world impact. It is a real world impact, though, because it brought this community together. And that is a real world impact.
It's real to us. I'm realizing, like, everybody I'm inviting to my wedding, besides my direct family members, are people I met through the Wheel of Time community. I'm like, not my coworkers, it's just, fuck, everybody. It's just friends I made along the way, I guess, was the real treasure.
Right, but yeah, I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the point of life if not to make weird friends along the way?
Right.
But that is funny that you get out so little.
Hey,
game recognizes game.
All right. Hey,
it takes...
At least I live in a city. I have the potential to meet people.
Hey, there are community events out here that I don't go to.
How would you know?
I'm on the Facebook group. Except for that 10-minute period today.
Did Facebook go down today?
Facebook and Threads and Instagram and Facebook Messenger all went down for like half an hour, something like that. Like it was kind of weird. Like it logged everyone out. Like, I just thought my app was being weird, but then I went over to Twitter and sure enough, everyone's like, what the fuck is happening to Meta? Like all of Meta went down for a bit.
Yeah, I noticed. I've dislodged myself from Meta. I don't have any accounts. Our podcast does, but you manage those.
Yeah, I just put the picture up every week.
Yeah,
the description. I have no idea if anyone appreciates that, but we get given beautiful art, so I figure it might as well be used for something.
Yes.
All right, so the bubble's over. Faile,
everybody's freaking out.
Faile goes to her tent, and next we're talking to Alejandra.
And I have to wonder at this point, maybe the wise ones aren't necessarily coming out to comfort people because they've been drinking the tea. Like, we don't see any direct evidence of that, but, like, maybe the wise ones are starting to get a little sleepy.
It's
probably a little early.
It's
Yeah,
only been
it's probably
like
a little
half
early.
an hour. She says it's a short walk.
And Perrin, really, the ripples happen almost immediately after he dumps the tea in the water.
Right.
So it hasn't had time to travel and all that kind of stuff.
It's just still early, and I think they're all sitting in their tents, like poking themselves to make sure that they're still real, because that's what Faile and the Wise One are doing at first. So, like, yeah. Faile just hurries to her tent, and gets to Alejandra. Alejandra's like, did shit just get weird? Faile's like, yes, absolutely. That just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then Alejandra basically is like, I'm kind of feeling a little broken and sad. And Faile is like, gonna go comfort her. And then Aravine shows up and is like, I have news from Alvin. Because we're just doing all the A names, apparently. Alejandra and Aravine and Alvin.
Oh my god, the A
Only
names.
Faile and Therill have the beauty of a different letter.
And all of these characters only appear in, like, the Malden chapters. Like, after Malden, these characters never matter. They never appear again. She never references them. They never pop up again. And, like, and they barely matter for Malden because, like, although I will say, I believe the father here, Alvin?
Yeah.
Or no, maybe the Spot's either Theral or Alvin follows them
Theral
out
does.
and
It's
sees. Theral does. So Theral's really like the hero here, right? He's the one who steals the rod. He's the one who spots them being nailed by Galena, and he's the one who reports it and goes and gets help and sees the flag waving.
Yep. Real MVP, Theral.
Theral, like, but never mentioned again. Thanks, Fael. Just no.
Really? I thought they were mentioned again.
Yeah.
Seriously?
I mean, in this book, right? But once they're out of Malden, that's their. Sanderson never mentions them in his books.
Oh, I totally thought that they got mentioned again in the like post-rescue world.
Let me double check.
Because I know that they get mentioned during the act of the rescue, like when Fael's organizing her people. Like I think it's in Perrin's POV, but Fael is addressing him. But that doesn't count. That's still part of Malden. I thought that they were mentioned.
Last description is Fael tells her followers to leave, but Theral follows the escape party and sees Galena crash the house on them. He sees Magnet's signal and brings Aravine and Roland to help. Knife of Dreams, chapter 30.
Wow.
Last.
Nice work, Sanderson. Way to leave out the really most valuable player.
And Alvin isn't even mentioned in that chapter.
Sure. The Aravine plays a big role. Aravine's been around and will continue to be around.
Aravine's been around. And yeah, Aravine is definitely part of that's she's been around and she comes back. She's not.
But oh well. But yeah, these characters are excellent and amazing and around for a very brief amount of time. Just illiterate, barely intelligible woods people, like woodsmen or something like that. Farmers, I don't know.
But Aravine essentially becomes the organizer of the refugees, both before and after the escape from Malden.
Yeah, she's like Fael's head of household kind of person.
Basically.
Yeah, it's Alvon, not Alvin. I've been saying Alvin like Alvin and the Chipmunks. It's Alvon, technically.
Alvin!
So yeah, basically their news is that Theral just kind of did a little oops that fell in my pocket with the oath rod.
Right, yeah. They literally just like stole it because nobody was watching it because Thorava assumes that nobody wants it except Galena. And so she's not guarding it because she knows Galena can't pick it up.
Right, and the reason that she punished Magdan was just because Magdan was in her tent. She didn't have any idea why Magdan was there. Magdan hadn't gotten anywhere near the rod. Theral didn't have to do that much to get it, apparently. He's just like, oh, this looks convenient. It'll just fall in my pocket and it's fine. So yeah, she clearly leaves it. Because I think, doesn't Galena actually say that Thorava leaves it out sometimes just to taunt her?
Oh yeah, totally.
So yeah, I bet she had been doing that before the morning meeting with Savannah, and Theral saw it still like lying on the coffee table and was like, oops.
Oh, and sorry, how can we forget? Aravine also is a Dark Friend?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She's the one who stabs
some Aes Sedai. I don't think it's an important Aes Sedai.
Berisha.
Yeah. And that's why Fael and the Horn and her caravan end up in the Waste. Or in the Blight. That's why Alvar ends up sounding the horn where he does. All of that is because of Aravine. I like Aravine, even though she's a Dark Friend.
I completely forgot she was a Dark Friend. Thank you, chat. Yeah. I had no idea she was a Dark Friend.
I forget that we have to do Dark Friend alert.
Oh yeah, I missed that one.
We announced far more obvious Dark Friends, so I should have just busted out the old Dark Friend alert. But yeah, because it's a really late betrayal and she does it really sadly. She like apologizes to Fael as it's happening, so like the sense of betrayal doesn't really get to sink in before she's dead and the plot has moved forward.
She's like, and she doesn't like want to be a Dark Friend. It sounds like she wasn't and got like activated and had to do that one thing.
Exactly.
But like she's been on Fael's side the whole time.
Yeah, she's like, I joined you of my own accord. I thought I could escape, but it turns out you can't escape, right? Like, she thought she was free. And again, kind of like how Thorava was a true believer in Couladin, like, Aravine's loyalty to Fael was entirely of herself. She was a true believer, but she has responsibilities that she can't ignore.
Oh, okay, I have another theory. Alvin and his son ran away 3 times, and we got 3... ripples. So it was every time they ran away, they were stressing the pattern locally because they needed to be there, right, to help Fael and keep her alive. And them running away would have caused an effect that would have led to Perrin dying and the world ending. So them running away 3 times caused 3 ripples.
I think you might be reaching.
What? No! I never reach on this podcast. Do not accuse me of reaching on that. There's 3 and 3. Listen, things happen in threes. Clearly, it's the same thing. Nothing else can happen in 3 unless it's a direct reflection of what's going on with this ripple.
Okay.
I'm sticking to it.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Lila just points out, Roland also puts 3 flowers in Fail's hair.
Oh, goodness.
So, yeah.
The ripples with the flowers. Oh, no.
It turns out Roland was the actual dragon reborn, and if he had gone to the columns, he would have come out with the double dragons, and so his death clearly results in a false dragon winning the last battle.
Yeah, you and Demon Dread should go workshop that.
Let the Lord of Chaos rule.
Oh, God. Everything that comes in threes is going to be responsible for this from now on. If it comes in threes, it's why this happened. It's a bit.
Well, because I mean, if we can attribute future events like Bale firing Natrum's Barrow to this event, right? If we can be like, oh, it just hasn't happened yet, right? We can anything that happens in threes, we can reference. See, like, oh yeah, that's what reflected back in time and caused the Bale scream.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's good. That's sound reasoning.
I'm sticking to it.
Okay, where are we?
Galena was no longer a threat. Now she was salvation. Laugh, 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 laugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, she's still a threat.
Yeah.
She's gonna kill you anyway.
Yeah. Awkward assumption, Fael. Like, no.
And again, for these 2 guys, right? I'm telling you, they are the central characters of this chapter. Alvon and his son. Because that Galena ain't gonna help nobody, my lady. She says she's Aes Sedai and all, but she's that Tharava's plaything, if you ask me. Right? She's not gonna help. He calls it. She's not gonna help anybody.
Yep. He's like, I don't know what's going on with her, but it's not what you think is going on with her, for sure.
He's like, I want no part of it. I got you the rod because you wanted the rod, but that's all I'm like. I don't think it's gonna do what you think it's gonna do.
Yeah, like I'm just here for you, not here for that.
Which actually does make sense why he follows Galena and spies, and he's like, he thinks she's a threat, right?
His dad thinks she's a threat.
Yeah.
The mistrust is a family trait. We're gonna assume.
Right.
Daryl's going home, hearing nothing but you just mark my words. She's gonna betray them, and he's thinking to himself, "Well, I'm gonna save them from the betrayer."
Right. And he does.
And he does. He does.
And gets 0 credit for it.
Well, we will give him all the credit now
All the
and
credit.
then when we get there. All the credit. Theral, MVP of the entire series. For want of a Theral, the world was lost.
So then Roland shows up, sort of spying. He sees the escape plans. And we get his little teasing about how he's talking about running away and changing his mind because he doesn't want to be part of the Shido anymore. And she's like, oh no, you're going to run away and leave me. And he's like, and maybe I'll take you with me. And she's like, you jerk.
Yeah, which classic RJ flirting from a writing perspective. So cringe. So the wrong kind of cringe.
Yeah.
But very much how RJ writes flirting.
I don't have a lot to say about it.
It's his attempt at flirting, very in character for the people in question. Just getting a really aggressively disgusting reiteration of the offer that he's giving her. Your husband won't mind if you sleep with me while you're wearing white, so that means that you definitely want to sleep with me. The only reason you don't want to sleep with me is because you're married, so clearly I can just keep pressing my suit because you want me so much.
What happens when you're a guy shine stays when you're a guy shine, right? Does that sort of...
Yeah.
The cheating in a different zip code doesn't count. Like, I've heard that too,
Oh,
right?
my
Like, all
God.
this bullshit,
Yeah.
like, these bullshit justifications for, like, no, it doesn't count in this time.
And that's garbage. It's just garbage. Like, and that's where Fael's at. Is like, no, I don't want to sleep with you. Period. You might be real pretty, but like, I have reasons beyond like my marital obligation. Like, she uses the husband thing, but it's like she doesn't decide she's willing to sleep with him until she thinks it's for her survival. Like,
It's like when you're being flirted with the creep at the bar and you're like, I'm married. That's not why I'm not going to sleep with you, but I'm definitely married.
Right.
You know,
and like RJ tries to slip in this thing about how like he's actually like growing on her from like a visual attractiveness standpoint. And like he's behaving honorably towards her. So us, the reader, are supposed to be kind of shipping them now. But like,
it's an attempt to make us feel bad when Perrin, caves in his skull.
And it's not going to work.
And it just doesn't work for me. No.
Bash his brains in. Do it.
Yeah.
Do it. If Roland had one time been like, I would like to be romantically involved with you, but I'll help you escape regardless, and then never brought it up again, that would be fine.
Right.
You're allowed to state your piece. But the continued pressing is just like, nope, now you're a creep. Nah, you're a creep and I don't like you.
And there's a paragraph here that explains his reasoning and his desire. We cannot follow a false Car'a'carn and a wetlander at that, but perhaps we will be allowed to live out our lives in our own holds. We think on it. We have been a long time from home, and these Shaidos sicken us. So it very clearly lays out, like, I can't follow Rand, but I don't want to follow these Shaido. I just want to go home.
Right, which, like, that's fair. You're allowed to admit that you were wrong and tied yourself to the wrong horse, to the wrong train. Like, you're allowed to decide that you made a bad call and get off the ride. Like, that is a very real and important thing we should encourage. We should not shame him for making the choice now that he's made it.
If he made the choice, yes, but he didn't actually ever make that choice, right? He never actually left. He never actually did anything. He never helped anybody escape.
But when they pulled him out of the basement, they're all suited up and ready to go. They are in the act of leaving and got side quested to rescue them out of the basement. So, it all happens on the same day at the same time and becomes moot. So he's telling her this the day before? The morning of?
Yeah, so I only synced up when Perrin puts... I forgot how much time there is between when Perrin drops the tea in the water and when he actually attacks. I haven't done that research yet. I don't have that in front of me.
Well, you were saying before that he did it this morning. So, like, Roland basically tells her, we're thinking about it, goes away, gets suited up, and then comes back and is like, all right, we're going. So I think he is following through pretty reasonably on his promise here.
Yeah, my understanding is the battle, Perrin attacks later in the day after, he dumps the tea super early in the morning and then attacks right that afternoon.
Yeah, that afternoon. So I think Roland's timing in terms of telling her and following through are pretty reasonable because it's same day. It's just a huge amount of book in between. So it, again, feels like forever.
So yeah, when we go back to Perrin in Knife of Dreams chapter 12, Faile has been a prisoner for 51 days, but here she's been a prisoner for more than 2 months, which is more than 60.
I thought it was less than 2 months.
Less than 2 months?
Less than 2 months, yeah.
Okay. Assuming a month is the same length in Wheel of Time, right? I know a week is 10 days, but I think a month is still 30 days or so.
Okay, I've never questioned it that hard.
Either way, minimum 50. If a month is 28 days, we're talking 56, 51. So we definitely jump back in time when we go back to Perrin, and then we have to catch back up. The morning that Perrin puts the stuff in the aqueduct is the 54th day since Faile was taken. She says not quite 2 months, assuming 2 months, a month being 28 days, is 56. That's 2 days short. So that's still, we're sort of, everything's matching up. He's just not giving specifics on either end that match up, right? Like, it's before noon. So it looks like Faile's next POV is just like noon the same day. And then they go into the town. And then, that afternoon is the attack.
So yeah, Roland says it's not decided if they're going to go yet, but clearly he's on his way to the meeting where they decide. I would say that's probably what's happening, is he decided to stop and let her know that that's probably going to happen. And then he went off and voted, and then they all went and got their shit and headed out and got sidetracked by rescuing Faile and co out of the basement. I'm so glad you've done this timeline research, because I had no idea.
Yeah. Basically, the rest of Knife of Dreams is this day. Like, there's a little bit of a backtrack on Perrin, right? But the rest of Perrin and Faile is the rest of this day.
Wow. That's wild. A lot happens on this one day. Yeah, so all I've got left is a readout. Light. She had the rod, leaning against her arm so coolly, but there was no way to give it to Galena until Thorava let her walk about freely again. No way to be sure that the woman would not betray her before then out of desperation. Roland offered her escape, if the Meriden decided to leave, but he would continue to try to inveigle her into his blankets so long as she wore white. And if the Meriden decided not to go, would one of them betray her escape plans? If Roland could be believed, they all knew. Hope and danger, all tied together inextricably. What a tangle. She had turned out to have been exactly right about Thorava's reaction. Just before midday, all the Gai'Shine were herded into the open and made to strip to their skins. Covering herself as best she could with her hands, Faile huddled together with other women wearing Savannah's belt and collar. They had been made to put those on again straight away. Huddled for a scrap of decency while Shido rummaged through the Gai'Shine tents, tossing everything out into the mud. All Faile could do was think about her hiding place inside the town and pray. Hope and danger, and no way to untangle them. And there we have it.
And I'll just follow up saying I did confirm 1 month is 28 days in Wheel of Time, which means that 1 year is 13 months, the way it should be, which also works as 13 Forsaken. I love it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jordan.
Can we just reference, I propose a new calendar. I call it the Chosen calendar. We have 13 months. Each one's named after one of the Chosen.
I would buy that calendar.
I think it works.
I like it. I like it.
I think that's all I had to say about that chapter. I don't have anything about the readout.
Yeah, it's good to know that Faile immediately relocated the rod out of the tents.
Mm-hmm. She's hiding it in the town. Also, interesting, she hid inside the town and pray. Always interesting when characters pray in the series.
To who? Pray how?
Yeah.
What?
Pray to what? To the creator?
What is this religion?
I'm assuming they're just to the creator,
yeah,
right?
One would assume.
But
yeah.
Yeah.
It's hoping really, 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 really hard.
But I do think that's just our language seeping into the Wheel
Agreed.
of Time, right? I do think that's just Jordan using pray the way you and I use pray in English, right? I pray that would, I use pray even though I don't believe in like a god, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, it's like I'm hoping, I pray, I wish.
Yeah, but it's a word that doesn't make sense if you don't have an organized religion with like rituals and prayers per se. It's like, give us that detail or don't have a religion. Like,
right.
But he filed off most of the serial numbers, but there's still a shiny patch, and you can tell that there was a serial number there.
Samuary, Damondrill,
Ravinember. Well, I mean, yeah, that would be. I mean, certainly July and August could stand to be renamed to something more important.
Mm-hmm. I think December would have to be
Decemberog.
Oh no, Samuary. I think that works. That's still winter.
Yeah.
Samarog. Oh, that's Samuel. Because Samaraj and Samael. This is gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough. But I guess we have June, July.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, we can just chuck the word out entirely. Like, no, it's the month of Masana. Deal with it.
Right.
Like, I mean, fucking July and August. Like, July and August. These are not number words. These don't mean anything except for my dick is big and so is mine. I'm sorry. Have you studied Roman history? Ha! I brought Roman history up. But, like, it's just a dick swinging contest.
And of course, we have to add in a month, right?
Right, which is awesome.
So we just get to pick one that doesn't, that's the new one. I think that pretty much has to be a Shalmael.
Moradin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Call me Ishamael, the new month.
Mm-hmm. And there is no Mahale month. I'm not doing that one. I guess, you know what? Leap Day. We can call Leap Day Mahale.
Sure, fine. I'll allow it.
It pops up once every 4 years for one day.
I could do that.
It's not part of any particular month. That's the Mahale Day. Mahale Day.
I like it. Yeah.
Because we just had that. We just had Leap Day this past week.
Yep, this was a leap year. we had an extra day, which was fun.
It threw off my calendar because I do my calendar on a whiteboard, and I totally just stopped at 28 on February because I was like, yeah, February stops at 28, and then I wrote all of March, and I was like, so I had this. I'm going suit shopping for my wedding tomorrow, and I was just like, I had it on. I was like, that doesn't make sense, and then I was like, realized it's because I was one day off on my calendar. Because like, why would I go suit shopping while I'm recording? It doesn't. No. That's Wednesday.
That's funny. Yeah, I, of course, had to fall down a little rabbit hole on Leap Days and watch a Star Talk with, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Chuck Nice, just like doing they're clearly high, like podcast bro thing, talking about, like they're so clearly high. I love Star Talk. They're so funny.
What, Neil deGrasse Tyson smokes
with
weed?
Chuck Nice? Like,
I don't know who Chuck Nice is.
He's a comedian. So, that's all you need to know.
You know what I love? My dad started sending me clips of this guy giving me interesting concepts, and I look at it, and it's Neil deGrasse Tyson doing his thing. I'm like, yeah.
I've heard of him.
I have no idea who this... Yeah, I think I've heard of this guy at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, they did a little segment on Leap Days, and it was really funny because, like, Chuck's like, well, why? Why do we have this? And Neil's like, well, reasons. So we add a day. And Chuck's like, okay, cool. And then Neil's like, but mathy, every 100 years we have to skip a leap day because again, the error accumulates. And Chuck's like, okay, I got that. Like he goes through this whole exasperated thing. And then Neil's like, but wait, every 400 years you don't skip a day. Like it just keeps fucking going. Because nature doesn't read books. Nature doesn't have a clock. Nature just is. We're imposing order and it's imperfect.
Essentially, it's a mathematical sequence, right? Because we are approximating. Have you ever done a Taylor sequence in math? No. Okay. That's basically, it's a way to approximate a complex Taylor series. Thank you. Yes. It's a way to approximate take a nonlinear equation and approximate it with a sum of linear equations. Right? Because linear equations are much easier to work with. The more linear equations you add on, the more precise you can get, but you're never going to be exact because it's a non-linear. And so that's essentially what we're doing is every time we say, oh, every 4 years we have a leap year. That's your first order approximation. That's your first term of your Taylor series. And then your second term, to get closer, oh, we have to add in another factor. So then you add in your other factor, which is, but we don't do it every 100 years, right? And then you add in your third, which is, oh, but we do it every 400 years. And that's basically, you're subtracting and adding and subtracting and adding and subtracting and adding. And each time you're subtracting and adding a smaller number to get closer to the right result.
That makes sense. I did do enough calculus to be able to envision how that works.
And that's all we're doing with is, and then we just... I think at some point they're like, yeah, that's close enough within, 100 million years. We don't need to, fix it more.
Yeah, we do have like leap seconds and shit like that, like every now and then for reasons. But yeah, it's it's kind of wild. We just have to adjust the calendar because it's not actually a perfect model. It's a model, right? And all models are liars.
And let's not even talk about the fact that like our orbit around the sun, it's not even a 3-body problem, right? It's a 9/1000 body problem, right? Like the Earth's orbit is not stable long term. It will eventually change. The length of a year will change. The length of
they have been changing and they will continue to change.
They have been changing and they will continue to change. You're right. Yeah, like the length of a year will not remain the same over time. So
yeah, I was watching a video just the other day that was like, oh yeah, back at this period of history, for the evolution of life, like the days were shorter, so the solar radiation was more intense. Like it's just conditions. Like we are slowing down and moving away from the sun and wobbling and getting hit with shit and tugged on by the moon. And...
Yeah, weren't days like 20 hours?
Yeah, it was
right?
like 21 hours in this frame that this person was
21
talking
hours?
About. But
yeah,
it was shorter, and now it's the length it is, and it will continue to get longer over the next however many billion years until the sun eats us alive. well, we'll be dead.
It's why we had to change the definition of how long a second is, because it used to be like a portion of a day, and they were like, well, that's not fucking stable.
Right. They had to create a definition that exists outside of the context of actual earthly days, which is wild.
Oh yeah, the whole zodiac, the fact that zodiac signs have shifted in the sky now, so like, you know, yeah, you're not actually born on the zodiac sign you thought you were,
unless it's been adjusted, which the vast majority of them aren't. Or like that thing where it was like, oh, sharks are older than trees. Also, sharks are older than the North Star being the North Star, like
the North,
because
right. It didn't used to be in the north.
Where north is in terms of our spin changes, like it wobbles back and forth, and that's part of why we have climate cycles, but it also is moving in a larger pattern yet and just not being fixed.
Isn't that because the sun's elliptical is changing? Like the sun is rotating basically, and so as we stay in the elliptical with the sun, the overall background pattern of the stars shifts.
That would make sense. That would make sense because it's clearly this is not a Milankovitch cycle thing. That's different,
right?
So that I actually not sure what it is, but that would make sense that the sun's tilt itself changes the sky. Yeah. Right.
Where the sun is orbiting the galaxy, right?
It's embedded in the Orion arm.
Right. So as we move through the galaxy, we actually see different perspective.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the last time
on the stars.
Was it the last time we were at this spot in the Milky Way, dinosaurs ruled the Earth, or was it halfway around?
My understanding is the Earth has made like 2 or 3 revolutions around the galaxy.
Okay,
since it was created. That's my best guess. I don't have that off the top of my head, but yeah.
I remember at some point being told somewhere along that circle is when the dinosaurs were, and I can't remember if it was 180 degrees away from us or if it was where we came back around.
It feels like that's 180 degrees, because I feel like we make a revolution every, am I guessing, over 100 billion years?
Right.
And if dinosaurs were 65 billion years, right, that's the Jurassic million. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. It's when we get back to that spot, so much will have happened. Which is why Voyager is such a massive fucking plot, right? Like Star Trek Voyager, like they're hucked across the galaxy, even with all their technology. Like that's a long way. It's a really, really, really like dinosaurs were ruling the Earth levels of long way.
Saman Asai is saying it's about 250 million years to orbit the galaxy. So 65 million would be,
quarter?
Eighth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Quarter.
Wow. That's a long time.
Yeah, quarter.
65 million years is nothing, you guys, when we get into cosmology. Nothing. It's barely anything when you get into geology.
But if you think that is a quarter around the Milky Way. The stars are going to look different.
Yeah, the stars are going to look
real different. The stars are going to look different. Really different, right?
Absolutely. Like the stars of the Milky Way are obviously going to all stay relatively fixed, but relative.
Not necessarily.
Well, it depends, right? It depends on if they're in the arm or...
We only see stars of the Milky Way.
That's true.
We see galaxies. We see background galaxies, but most of what we see are stars in the Milky Way.
Visible light, like human experience, you're right, we only see the Milky Way. But yeah, I mean, it's like we're all moving at different speeds depending on if we're like in the main band of the arm or if we're like being hurled up and out of the ecliptic or out of the bulge. I mean, there's so much going on. I love the galaxy. The galaxy's so cool. Yeah. I mean, the universe is very cool too, but our galaxy is like really fucking cool.
Right. In a lot of ways, we are never able to really get close out of our galaxy. I don't think it's ever possible to get out of the galaxy.
No, I saw a really great map once of all the sci-fi universes and plotting them out on the galaxy. The vast majority of them are within a very nearby section of the galaxy. Very few sci-fi stories ever have imagined a place that is not in the Milky Way galaxy. Like it's just not a thing that most sci-fi has done. Like the farthest reaches of space you can imagine are still like within our quadrant, because most sci-fi people want to stay within the realms of what actual science has like attempted to get a handle on. And like, have you ever seen those maps of like just the circle of how far our observations go out? Or how far our signals go out, and it's like it's nothing. It's like if the whole thing is like the size of a dining room table, it's the size of like a quarter. It's just like, oh my god.
And then they fade to background noise. Like, there's no way to detect them at that point. Yeah, no, it's like this idea that we have this, like, out-radiating sphere that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it's going to contact these aliens who are going to, you know, hear from... No, it's too faint. It's become background noise long before it gets to anybody out there.
Yeah. We're shouting for the range of a few stars, of you know, several stars.
Maybe a couple hundred. Yeah.
Like, it's a ways.
Yeah.
It's a long ways. You know, and but you know, we put out our little Voyager probe, and it's finally, you know, punched through our solar bubble.
Right, which is nothing.
It's nothing.
It's nothing.
Our solar bubble is a thing that is actively protecting us the way that our atmosphere protects us from solar radiation, or our electric field protects us from solar radiation. The sun is doing that, like, in this giant bubble that Voyager only just pierced. Like, our sun goes out that far and, like, pushes back at cosmic rays for us. Like, and Voyager only just pooted over that line.
Reach the point of equilibrium where the sun is pushing out as hard as outer space is pushing in.
Yeah. Only just managed that. So it's like, again, like, space is really big. It's
mind-blowingly big, really.
so big. Which, again, I'm like, ever since I was a little kid wrapping my head around this, I was like, you mean to tell me there are people who don't think there's aliens? Like, the whole visitation of Earth in Little Green Men, obviously very silly, but, like, you can't tell me all those spots in the sky have not been running the same numbers game simulator that our planet was running.
Yeah, we have the same elements, same
Like,
basic building blocks. Yeah.
I don't believe that
Yeah.
there are not uninhabited planets out there. That's a silly concept.
But at the same time, I don't know that we will ever get outside our solar system, much less outside. Like,
Yeah.
I really don't think that it's realistic. No sci-fi concept to me is realistic to get out of our solar system.
Yeah, absolutely not. We have to break physics.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a generation ship to another solar system.
You know we're gonna try.
I know, but, like, the idea of having people for generations on this thing, like, there has to be some sort of breakthrough that in propulsion that I just don't see happening.
Yeah, no. Like, yeah, no, the concept of just zipping about between star systems is silly, but, like, you can't look at all that math and tell me that there aren't planets with weird animated fuzz growing on them. Like, I'm sorry. Like,
Sure.
No.
Sure.
That's a silly concept. But yeah, the difficulty of doing anything.
And this is where I think life is sort of an inevitable consequence of matter, right? Like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like, clearly, galaxies and stars and planets and life. Like, clearly. There's a
Right.
progression here. It's a thing. But, like...
And if it happened here, it can happen there.
Exactly.
It can happen anywhere.
But yeah, the idea that we're going to get out of our solar system and beyond is like, well, I think we should set our sights a little closer to home. That seems challenging enough for the time being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, assume that we're a great random representative sample of other life forms, and assume that, you know, like Carl Sagan said, like, there's a technological adolescence that you have to pass over if you want to become a spacefaring species. And clearly, no one has done that in our neck of the woods yet.
I really do think the Great Filter is just like, it's not possible. Space is too big.
Very probable.
That space, like, I think that's all these, like, people are like, what's the Great Filter? Could it be this? Could it be that? Is it some, you know, magic species, you know, going around killing all? No, it's just space is big.
Yeah, physics are hard. And space is really
Space is too big.
It's really big. Yeah.
And I think on that statement, I am done.
Space is big. Subscribe to our podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
Support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?